All right, let's just jump right in. Picture this, you're on Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, as the locals call it, and you're standing on the side of an old volcano. All around you, there's this, well, it's a graveyard of giants. These are the famous road moai. We're talking about hundreds of massive stone statues that just never made it to their destination. They're just lying there abandoned. Some are broken, others half buried. It's like they literally just stopped walking one day and never, ever started again. So for centuries, right, these silent giants have been the centerpiece of a really powerful story. It's this classic cautionary tale, A civilization so obsessed with building statues that they destroyed their entire world to do it. But what if that story, the one we've all been told, is just completely wrong? Because new evidence is starting to rewrite the entire history of one of the most mysterious places on the planet. Okay, so to get to the real truth here, we've got to start with the mystery that basically created the myth in the first place. These abandoned statues. I mean, why? Why were they just left here, frozen in time? The answer, and this is wild, starts with understanding just how unbelievably isolated these people were. And when I say isolated, I mean isolated. Rapa Nui is literally the most remote inhabited place on Earth. To put that in perspective, we're talking over 2,000 kilometers to get to the next inhabited island. Think about that. This was the final stop in this epic 60,000-year journey of human migration out of Africa. When those first Polynesian settlers landed their canoes, they had truly reached the end of the world. And you know that barren, grassy island we all picture today? Yeah, that's not what they found. Not even close. They found an absolute paradise. The whole island was covered in this thick, subtropical forest, filled with these massive Rapa Nui palm trees, some of the biggest palm species in the entire world. It was in this incredible garden at the very edge of the world that they started carving those giants. So this is where the popular story kicks in, right? The idea that the islanders got so obsessed with building and moving these statues that they chopped down every single tree on the island. But here's the thing. The statues themselves, they tell a completely different story. A story of absolutely brilliant engineering. The myth is pretty simple, and it paints a pretty damning picture. They used thousands of logs as rollers, right? Sacrificing their whole ecosystem for their stone gods. But the reality? Oh, the reality is so much cooler. New archaeology is showing us something incredible. The statues didn't need logs. They were built to walk. And the evidence for this? It is absolutely fascinating. Archaeologists started noticing this weird pattern. See, the statues that were abandoned on uphill paths, they're almost always on their backs, like they fell over backwards. But the ones on downhill paths, they're on their fronts. And get this, that lines up perfectly with the islanders' own oral history. The elders always said the statues walked. And it turns out their very design, with that low center of gravity, was perfect for a kind of rocking, walking motion. And it's not just a theory. People have actually tested this, and it works. All you need is a few teams of people and 3 strong ropes. You just rock the statue from one side to the other, pivoting it forward one big lumbering step at a time. It's kind of like trying to move a giant refrigerator across your kitchen. It's brilliant, it's efficient, and best of all, it didn't require chopping down an entire forest. Okay, so that brings up a huge question, right? If the Rapa Nui people didn't cut down all the trees to move their statues, then what in the world happened? How did this lush paradise turn into a grassland? Well, the answer, it lies with a tiny, almost invisible invader. Turns out the islanders accidentally brought a stowaway with them on their canoes. And this little stowaway was way more destructive than any axe could ever be. It's a crazy example of how an ecosystem can just fall apart. Not because of some big, dramatic act of destruction, but because of a slow, creeping catastrophe. The culprit? The Polynesian rat. Yup, a rat. This is the smoking gun. Think about it. They arrive on this island with 0 natural predators and a basically endless buffet of palm nuts. Their population just exploded. And here's the critical part that archaeologists found. The rats weren't just eating the palm nuts. They were eating the very future of the forest. At their peak, scientists estimate the rat population could have soared to, get this, 2 million, maybe even more. That's just an overwhelming, unstoppable force literally nibbling away at the foundation of the entire island's ecosystem. So the Great Palm Forest didn't get chopped down. It just grew old and died out. Because every time a seed fell, A rat ate it. No new trees could ever grow up to replace the old ones. It wasn't a case of ecocide, it was an ecological plague. And you know what? The Rapa Nui people, they were resilient. They adapted. They survived. The real collapse, well, that came from the sea. See, the society didn't fall apart when the trees were gone. Like I said, these people were survivors. The true, tragic end that began on a single day, Easter Sunday, 1722, the day the first European ships appeared on the horizon. And that contact, it was absolutely catastrophic. First came the diseases, smallpox, things the islanders had zero immunity to. Then, in the 1860s, it got even worse. Slavers arrived. Peruvian ships kidnapped over 1,500 people. That was almost half their entire population, forcing them into brutal labor. The result? By 1877, there were only 111 Rapa Nui people left alive on their own island. And think about who was taken. It wasn't just random people. The slavers took the island's king, his heir, and every single one of the priests and clan leaders. Why does that matter so much? Because they were the only people who knew how to read and write Rungo Rungo, the island's completely unique written language. When they were taken and died in slavery, the ability to read their own history, it just vanished. The entire memory of a civilization was just erased. Imagine being one of the few left behind, ravaged by sickness, overcome with grief. You'd lose faith, wouldn't you? Their powerful stone ancestors hadn't protected them, and so in this final, absolutely heartbreaking act of despair, they turned on the very symbols of their culture. They toppled the statues themselves, pushing them face down into the dirt, silencing them forever. So when you step back and look at all the evidence we have now, the whole story just flips on its head. Those abandoned statues on the road, they're not monuments to some foolish, self-destructive people. No, they're monuments to a society that was thriving, innovating, a society that was suddenly and violently interrupted. The real takeaway here is crystal clear. The collapse of Rapa Nui society, it wasn't a suicide. It wasn't some simple lesson about environmentalism. It was a murder carried out by disease, by slavery, and by the devastating consequences of contact with the outside world. And that leaves us with a really profound kind of chilling thought. The people of Rapa Nui lost their entire history because their knowledge keepers, their living libraries, were stolen away in just a single generation. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If the keepers of our own complex knowledge, our scientists, our engineers, our historians, were all suddenly taken from us, how long would it take before our greatest achievements became just myths? How long before our own history became as silent as the stone giants of Rapa Nui?